Welcome to online e-learning produced by MD Sami Ulajim, Assistant Professor, Netaji Subhas Mahavidyalaya, Haldibaड़ी, Coach Bihar. Dear student, today I am going to discuss about Alexander Pope's very famous mock heroic poem, The Rape of the Lock. The Rape of the Lock was written by Alexander Pope in the year 1712, and it was published in 2 cantos only at the very beginning. But before going to the detail of Rape of the Lock, I want to talk about the life of Alexander Pope. First of all, we need to remember that Alexander Pope was a Catholic Christian, and at the time of Pope, it was very difficult for the Catholics to live at par with the other Britishers, because Catholics were compelled to live beyond the 20-kilometer radius of London, and the main reason for this was Catholics were discriminated. Alexander Pope was born in the year 1688 in a Catholic family. While his father was a rather well-to-do linen draper, Pope lost the privilege of going to public school due to his religious adherence. As the accession to the Protestant William the Orange to the British throne made sure that the Catholics were barred from attending public school and public events in and around London. As a result, the self-taught Pope, in spite of being ardent reader, grew up with inaccurate knowledge on many subjects. Regarding the disadvantage of Pope, David Dacis, a very famous literary critic, says in his book, A Critical History of English Literature, that Pope was a Roman Catholic at a time when Roman Catholics in England still suffered civil disabilities. He was also sick and malformed. He had hunchbacked. However, Dacis also opines that these advantages might have gone on to contribute to Pope's uniquely individuality, as opposed to what one might call the social and Augustan qualities. The lack of privileges while growing up did not facilitate Pope's early literary career, and the lack of formal learning is reflected in his early pieces such as Pastorals, which was published in the year 1709, and Essays on Criticism, which was published in the year 1711. It is the audacious translation of Homer that brought him fame and fortune, enabling him to shift from the humble Benfield to the more aristocratic Twickenham, where he spent the rest of his life. Once Pope overcame some of the initial hurdles, he went on to become the most celebrated poet of his time, that thrived on didactic and satirical verses. Regarding Pope's poetic achievement, Long says, I am talking about J. Long, another famous critic after David Dacis. J. Long says, there is hardly an ideal, a belief, a doubt, a fashion, a whim of Queen Anne's time that is not neatly expressed in his poetry. In spite of his aversion to make open political comments, Pope was certainly a man of his age and used poetry as his medium of making political statements. In this regard, Pat Rogers observes how his works reflect the most urgently debated topics of the moment, whether war and peace, the Jacobite risings, the South Sea bubble, the Atterbury plot, the excise crisis, or the development of the patriot opposition to Walpole. When he wrote a poem on the highly contentious Treaty of Utrecht in the year 1713, along with dozens of willing poetasters, his work Windsor Forest stood almost alone in mentioning the notorious slave contract that formed part of the diplomatic deal. Now, the Pope's works. For the sake of convenience, Pope's work have been divided into three categories. Literary historians tend to divide Pope's works into three broad groups: the early, the middle, and the last phase. In the early part of the Pope's literary career, he wrote several minor poems such as Pastorals, which was published in the year 1709, Windsor Forest 1713, Masiha, a sacred eclogue, in the year 1712, which was a combination of what Decis terms Virgil's fourth eclogue with the messianic parts of Isaiah in couplet verse of high formal gravity. Essays on Criticism, which was published in the year 1711, and The Rape of the Lock. Rape of the Lock was published in the year 1712. The second phase of poetic career comprises the famous translation, and the third phase consists of works like the Dunciad and the Epistle. Among his works in the first phase, Essays on Criticism and The Rape of the Lock deserve critical attention. Rape of the Lock, which I have already said to you, that was published in the year 1712, and it was in two cantos only at the very beginning. Though the translation of Homer would bring Pope financial success later, it was the publication of The Rape of the Lock that truly marked the birth of a genius. The Rape of the Lock, though written when Pope was only 24 years old, this poem is widely considered to be one of Pope's greatest achievements. When the first edition of this poem was published, Pope was living in Benfield in the Windsor Forest. The young Pope became friendly with a neighboring Catholic family, the Blounds of Maple Durham. The family had two young sisters, Martha, who was 19 years old, and Patty, who was 17 years old. One of the cousins of this Blount family was a lively woman called Arabella Farmer, who is named in Rape of the Lock as Belinda. And one of the distant relative of the family was Lord Pater, who was Baron, whose family and the farmers had a good relationship until Lord Pater stole a lock of hair from Arabella's head, sometimes in the year 1711. This created a wide gulf between the two family, the Arabella family, Arabella farmers family, and the Lord Peter's family. Pope, after being requested by John Carroll, a Catholic friend of Pope and also the godfather of Martha, decided to write a poem that would reconcile these families. This was the background of writing by Pope the rape of the law. Dear student, in the second module I will discuss about the gist of rape of the law. Thank you.